Hello friends, I hope you're all enjoying Scottish Summit. Thanks for joining my session. A big thank you to our sponsors, obviously, ScriptRunner, Global, they're driving quality, DG, DQ, Proximo, Redspine, AgileSys, and Hitachi Solutions. These are the sponsors that make this event a reality, so thank you very much, and thanks to you for attending this one. Make sure you check our sponsors. My name is Christos Matskas. I work as a program manager at Microsoft Identity, and my aspiration is to help you all write better, more secure software when it comes to developing and running solutions, whether they're on the cloud, on-prem, or whatever platform you choose to do that in the end. Cybersecurity is very important. Unfortunately, I've worked with a lot of customers in the industry, and it's more than apparent that security and performance are usually two of the things that are an afterthought. As developers, as companies, we try to push software out to the world as quickly as possible. However, without the right principles in mind, then we can make the news for the wrong reasons. In fact, loss of revenue for the last 5 years has grown due to cybersecurity, has grown significantly. It was around $500 billion back in 2015, and unfortunately, as of 2020, that amount has reached the 1 trillion. That means that a lot of companies out there are losing money because of the attacks, and it's very interesting because it's not zero-day attacks anymore. It's not operating system attacks. Their attackers are becoming a lot more evolved into how they run these attacks. They will use a lot of social engineering, they will try to find the easy way. And we, as developers, don't make their life too hard, to be honest, because we do make quite a few mistakes. Perfect example is from my past experience, where at some point I was running my blog on Azure, and I was using an email service to send emails to my subscribers every time they signed up to my website. So at some point I decided to use the CI/CD, the DevOps integration between GitHub and Azure Web Apps to run my site. And I was super excited and very happy with myself for being able to set that up. What I didn't realize is that I pushed my code into a public repository on GitHub. That meant that when I went to bed overnight, my code was out there available for anyone to see. And when I woke up the next morning, I got an email from SendGrid saying that my quota for the month has been reached. That meant that 20,000 emails had gone out overnight. And I was so excited because I thought, you know what, my website went viral. I am famous. Turns out that I was not famous, and that was not the scenario. My code was in a public repository. Some bot out there went and scanned that repo and found the SendGrid credentials, and they used that information to go and send emails for their own purposes. And it's not uncommon, it's not unheard of to find these scenarios in the industry where some developer will push some code with sensitive information in the public domain. And that can be GitHub or any other tool they use out there. And it's not just source code, so many attacks. Every week, in fact, somebody makes the news. And it is a sad realization when you think about it. Now, if you like what you see today on this session, and if you like to learn more about how to use identity for your solutions, we do have a twice weekly stream on Twitch that also goes on YouTube. And we invite developers, we invite people from the industry to come and build software with us, build solution with us, or do some IT pro work on the stream live and show us how to secure solutions end-to-end. Whether that's a web app running some JavaScript code that needs to authenticate users, whether that's DevOps with Terraform or Azure DevOps or Pulumi or any other tool that you might want to use, we show you how to do it end-to-end. So the 4 to 5 show is something that it's near and dear to my heart. If you want to see us, Tuesdays and Fridays at 4 p.m. UK time. See, I even have the 4 p.m. UK time because we are international. Right, on to the show. I mentioned about identity, and I've talked about identity, which in fact encompasses quite a few things, but at the very core, it's about having the ability to identify your users and bring them to your solution, whether it's an internal website or an external solution, somebody wants to come and buy stuff from your website. And we always make the mistake of thinking that this is easy. I made the same mistake back in 2008 when I got hired as a consultant for a university to build their CMS solution. And as naive and young developer I was back then, I thought I could do it better by implementing my own identity solution. Now, this is a journey that took me into all the nuances of how you manage users, because it always starts with a username and a password, but you'll be surprised that there is a lot of involvement when it comes to implementing an identity solution end-to-end. You have to think about how your users are going to reset their passwords, how they're going to get emails and notifications when something happens. How do you enable two-factor authentication? So even though I thought it would be a simple journey into managing all that and I could move on to something else and more exciting, right in other parts of the system, it ended up being a 3-month project where I had to go and understand how that works. And trust me, I'm sure that my solution was not bulletproof. In fact, if I were to go and look back into my older self and older solutions, I could find quite a few holes. So I was a sole developer doing that, but check out all these companies that have fallen victims to identity theft. These are sites that got hacked at some point and the users' information made it to the public and people were able to use them. It's a scary amount when you think that 10 billion accounts, 10 billion unique accounts, 10.5 billion unique accounts, in fact, have been stolen from various websites. Every week another website makes it the news. So we want to make sure that your company, you as a developer, don't make the news for their own reasons. It's a scary proposition. It's a hard thing to do. Trust me, we have 1,500 engineers working day in, day out, so you don't have to work as hard. And I will show you today through demos and through the progression of the slides, not too many slides, I promise, that identity or the solution that we have can solve a lot of problems for you, and you don't have to be an expert. In fact, I don't want you to be an expert in identity. I want you to be a fantastic developer that writes secure solutions, and you can move on to the next exciting project. So I work for Microsoft Identity, and we have a couple of products, but the Microsoft Identity platform is the solution that we are going to be talking about today. There's a little bit of marketing fluff here, but I want you to focus on the right-hand bottom value over there. That's 30 billion authentications per day. This means that we get over 30 billion accounts that come into Azure Active Directory, and we can scale. That just shows the scale of this thing. Now you might say, Chris, my company does not have 30 billion users. My company doesn't even have 1 million users, but it's fine. You as a developer don't ever have to think about how you're going to scale your identity solution. And that's a fantastic way, because if you think about it, when I built my own solution for that university, for that customer, I employed some database or some data store in the back end, and I had to think about how I was going to scale that. Imagine if I built a mobile app that went viral overnight, and yes, I was that popular. Suddenly I had 50,000 users or 100,000 users. How am I going to scale my backend for that? Well, I could. I mean, it's not unheard of. It's not an insane amount, but I also have to maintain the database. I have to make sure that nobody gets their hand on them. I have to make sure that backups in your stores work. You as a developer, when you use the Microsoft Identity platform, don't have to think about these things. And also your IT team doesn't have to worry about you screwing up the database, the encryption, the hashing, and what have you. Now, if you are sitting on your desk and your manager comes around and says, Mike, I want you to go and build something for me. I want you to add authentication to the new website that we're building for our enterprise, right? That's brilliant. Now, you might be very new to identity, you don't know what you're doing. So the first thing that you might ask yourself is, do I have, or do we have as a company, a solution already in place? If you are using Microsoft Office 365, or if you are using Azure, and the good news is that you already have an Azure Active Directory sitting somewhere there waiting for you and managing your users. That means that that Azure Active Directory can be leveraged to build your identity solution. The next logical question is, how easy can I implement this into my solution, and how quickly can I get off the ground? Is there enough documentation? Does it support the scenarios I want to? And yes, we do support a lot of scenarios. We do have fantastic documentation. We have learn modules to get you off the ground very, very quickly. You don't have to be an expert. That's the important bit here. And I will show you how little code it takes to build this thing. Now, does it support or integrate with my languages or my tools? Yes, I have a fairly provocative slide later on that will shake you to your core. But yeah, we work with any platform and any language. So it doesn't have to be a Microsoft first class library or language or tool that you use. We encourage all the developers from all major languages and frameworks to come and work with us, whether they're running on Microsoft stack or not. And finally, does it support advanced security capabilities? Now, this is very important because I already mentioned things like multi-factor authentication, but think about conditional access. Can I block access to Australian users after 6 p.m.? Nothing against Australian friends. Please don't feel offended. It's just an example. Let's say your company does not want to allow access to a certain region or certain users after a certain amount of time or for certain other criteria that are specific to your needs. How easy is that to implement in code? I'll tell you, it's very, very hard. And you have to implement all that logic in every single app that you build. But what if your identity provider were able to provide that for you out of the box for free without you having to implement anything? And that's the important bit here. That's what I'm trying to explain. You as a developer don't have to worry about too much about how all these things come into your code, as long as you use the tools and languages and frameworks that we support. So at this point, what do you get out of the Microsoft Identity Platform? Obviously, reduce sign-in friction. People that have already used Azure AD, Office, Outlook, what have you, they already have that experience of signing into a tenant, an Azure Active Directory tenant. And you can have the exact same experience for all your users, whether they're external or internal. You'll be able to sign them in to your solution and scale to whatever size of application you have. We give you access to your organizational data. That's very important. So once your users are through the door, once they make it through the authentication process, what can they access? Now, if you are creating organizational solutions, intranet apps, you're most likely have a plethora of data sitting behind that firewall, behind that sign-in experience, like Dynamics, CRM, you could have SharePoint, you can have OneDrive, other data that are accessible through the Graph API. In fact, we have a very large API surface that unifies all these queries into one tool, the Microsoft Graph, and allows you to create rich experiences for your users. I will do a demo later on to show you how and what that looks like when it comes to real life. Complying with IT, that's very, very important. I did mention multi-factor authentication. I mentioned conditional access, and there are all other policies that you want to enforce, like roles and groups and which app can access what. Your IT team will be responsible for setting these up. You as a developer don't have to think about how am I going to build all these things into my code. And you can automatically comply with the IT standards by just implementing your solution on top of the Microsoft Identity Platform. And finally, safeguarding access, not just to your customers' data, but also to your code and your resources. And you as a developer don't have to worry about certain things. For example, we've talked about this before, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to catch me. If you want to see this one, this session or another session, to be honest, the idea of being able to create solutions and apps that don't have any secrets. And by that, I mean, if you have to connect to a SQL database, or if you have to connect to another data store, if you have to connect to another API outside your system and you need to store those secrets somewhere, they become an attack vector for anyone. And for that reason, we want to encourage developers and enterprises to not have to worry about secrets. So safeguarding access, not just to your customers' data, but also how your solutions are deployed and run in a production environment or whatever environment, to ensure that sensitive information does not fall into the wrong hands. All supported out of the box. So hopefully by this point, I have convinced you that you don't want to write your own identity solution, and that the Microsoft Identity Platform is the ideal way to go the next time you need to add some identity into your solutions. When it comes to the implementation, what can you do, or what do you need to do to get things working? There are two main components into any identity implementation on the Microsoft Identity Platform. The first component, it's the app registration. This is when you go into Azure Active Directory and you say, I want to register an app that is going to use Azure Active Directory to authenticate users. This is showing the intent of what you're going to do. And there you can also say it's going to be a web app, or it's going to be some daemon, some service running behind the scenes. It's going to be a desktop solution that we want to implement. So that app registration creates a manifest or a declaration of what you're intending to do inside Azure Active Directory. This is all configurable through the portal. In fact, we will do a demo in in a few minutes. Or you can actually automate that. You can automate the provisioning of that app registration through code. It can be PowerShell, the Azure CLI. It can be the Microsoft Graph. So any tool that can call these endpoints can be used. Pulumi, Terraform, and what have you. So once you do your app registration, now we're ready to go and do some code. The code can be very simple depending on what you want to do, and can be quite elaborate depending again on your needs. But what if I were to tell you that you can implement the whole thing in one line of code if you're writing .NET? That would be awesome, wouldn't it? We'll see a demo on that. But in order for you to integrate your code with Azure Active Directory, you need to use libraries. It can be our library, the Microsoft Authentication Library, Emsa, for clients and services. If you're very new to your identity, then that's the recommended way to go, because we give you everything. You download one library for your language of choice, and it does everything for you, following the code examples. However, there are scenarios that you might have already a mature solution that you're bringing into the Microsoft Identity Platform, and you're thinking, I don't want to rip out all my old code. I'm using Node with Passport. Passport is an authentication library for Node, but Passport also has an Azure Active Directory component or extension, which means that as long as you add that extension and you point your Passport library or your solution to the Azure Active Directory endpoints, then you can go and authenticate users against our endpoint, because our endpoints are OpenID Connect certified, and we follow standards. So we build our solution on top of open standards like OpenID Connect and OAuth 2, and that makes everything compatible. Any library that is compatible with these standards can also be used with our platform. So you can bring your own code, you can bring your own libraries, or you can use our libraries. The choice is totally down to you. In certain scenarios, you might want to go back to the Active Directory and say, you know what, my front-end solution, my single-page app needs to call some APIs that pull some data from the back end, or I might want to call Graph, or I might want to call some internal APIs or Azure. So if that's the case, then you need to go back to Azure Active Directory and say, I want to have access. I want my application and my users of that application to have access to an API. And that's the extent of the configuration. It takes a few minutes to get everything off the ground. We give you templates and source control and source code and samples to get you started. And I will show you right after we finish this one. Now, supported identities, that's very important. We talked a little bit about this, but let's break it down even more. At the very top of your decision tree, there are only two decisions you need to make. Am I going to authenticate users in my organization, my Microsoft, Contoso, whatever company name you have, .com? So that's an intranet application, right? I want my users to be able to go home and sign into my Office solution so they can go and do some back office work. And if that's the case, then we need to use Azure Active Directory. However, we also have a different flavor called Azure Active Directory B2C, which stands for business to consumer or business to customer. Doesn't really matter. And that's where, when you're building a solution that is going to be customer facing, this is where something that you build for external users to come in. Let's say you're building a forum for your friend to manage your World of Warcraft forum, right? In that case, you want your friends to come and sign up and sign in and manage their profile. They're not organizational users, so we need to use B2C for that. Or if you are the next Walmart, the next big business, and you want to sell to your customers, right? They need to come in and sign up and sign in so they can buy your awesome products. Again, for that, you will be using B2C. So 2 main decisions. With B2C, the nice thing is they can also allow your users to come and sign up with social media accounts. So instead of using their email and password and get that password fatigue and the password usability and those emails and I forgot my password, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what, I'm gonna take the easy way out and I'm just gonna sign in with my Facebook account or with my Google account. B2C integrates with these tools and allows you to build a sign-in process where customers can choose which provider to use when they come into your solution. And that's quite nice because you give your users the choice of how to interact with your system and they don't have to always create a brand new account. But if you want to force them down that route, by forcing, I mean give them that choice, you can do that. I've already spoken about industry standards like SAML, OAuth 2, and OpenID Connect. Our platform is built on top of these, so any library that is compatible to that will work for you. There you go. No lock-in. Now let's look at how to create a solution that authenticates users inside Azure AD with JavaScript. JavaScript is very popular these days, and I want to start with JavaScript because it's not traditionally Microsoft, right? So let's hop onto our, I'm pressing the right keys. There you go. Should have been an escape. Right. So here I have my portal, and I'm going to jump directly into my Azure Active Directory. And here we're going to create a brand new app registration. Remember we talked about app registration, showing our intent. We're going to create a new registration. We're going to call it, we should call it Scottish Summit 2021. It is 2021. And since I'm using Azure AD here, I'm going to say I want to only sign in users from my directory. Okay, Scottish Summit 2021 it is. We like the name, right? Let's register this up. Right, so very few things I had to do so far. Let's say I'm very new to JavaScript. I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know what I'm doing with Identity either. So is there a way for us to get started very quickly? Yes, there is. So if we look into our quick starts, you'll see it says, what kind of application are you looking to create? And in fact, we said we're going to create a JavaScript application. So we'll go down here. And now we can choose one of the frameworks that we have. So it can be just plain vanilla JavaScript, it can be Angular, it can be React. And we say preview because some of these libraries are very new. We have the older versions, which use implicit flow. I'm not going to bore you with that. But this is all the new cool stuff that you get out of the box. And Blazor, if you like WebAssembly, we also provide you with Blazor. So let's go with a plain vanilla JavaScript app. So you notice here it guides us through the process. I don't have to worry about anything. It just says you need to have an Azure subscription, you need to have Node installed on your machine, and you need Visual Studio Code or another code editor, which is fine. We have all of these. Now I want to make some changes. That means that this will go and configure our app registration to work with the sample that we're creating here. And now I can go and download the sample and I can unzip it and make it work. So let's jump to the app. So let's have a very quick look at this application, right? It's a very basic app that opens a UI, and then we can call into a sign in and a sign out, and also there is a UI configuration. But I wanted to focus a little bit on the identity code. So here we have the Emsa configuration. The Auth Config is the file. So let me just close this one. Just a server here to run the app locally, and then here inside the app we have an Auth Config. This is where we define which Azure Active Directory we want to interact with. We also say which cache we want to use for our tokens, and in here we also have the client ID that corresponds to the app that we just created. And this is all it takes. The rest of it is just some logging information. So even technically I could just remove line 14 to 36 and the code will still work fine. And this is the config setting where we define everything. And next we move into the pop-up. We give you two options. When you use JavaScript, you can actually either do a redirect on your website to go into Azure Active Directory to authenticate users and come back, or you can do a pop-up. I think the pop-up looks much nicer when it comes to running the app. And I think the default is pop-up as well. So here we have the loading of the page. but let's see how much it takes to actually authenticate users. You'll see here we have a sign in from line 33 to 37. So technically it's 30, like 2 lines of code for signing in. Then for signing out, we have 2 more lines of code. You're with me so far, right? And then down here, we have another function that goes and grabs tokens for speaking to the graph later on. But if we were not talking to an API, if we're just focusing on signing in and signing out users, it literally takes 10 lines of config and 4 lines of code to run it. So let's run the app and see how that looks like. So I will open a terminal and I'll run npm start. If that's the first time that you're running the app, you have to do npm install, but I've done it already, so npm start. Spare you the pain of seeing npm downloading half the internet. Did I say that loud? Okay, nothing against the node, I'm just messing. Right, so it's running on port 3000, so let's navigate to that page and see what happens. Localhost 3000. Ooh, check this out. I mean, it's not the best UI, but it is functional, right? So let's sign in here. And in the sign in, it will ask me to select the account I want to sign in with. I think I have this one. No, I think it's wrong account. So it should be this one. Well, I remember the password, so let's on Microsoft. So I'm using a password manager for all my passwords. So let's bring that pop up again. And I mean, it's great because now I am prompted for my 2-factor authentication. So I should receive, there you go, I've got my prompt from Azure AD to say your code has arrived. So let's put the code in. See, I didn't have to type anything. I didn't have to change anything. My Azure Active Directory is taking care of me because it's configured for 2-factor authentication. So I'm texting it, I'm adding it in. So now I'm signed in. I can go and look at my profile. So that's the information that came as I signed in. Obviously, this is demo account, this is demo information, nothing real. And we give you access to demo accounts if you want to. And then I can also go and read my emails. Check this out. Very few lines of code to do all this. So there you have it. JavaScript only takes, let's call it 20 lines of code to implement sign in and sign out. And in fact, I can click on the sign out. It will ask me which account I want to sign out from. None of them. So if I close the window down, it doesn't sign me out. It just signs me out from the app. It doesn't sign me out from Azure Active Directory. And we have samples for all the different types. We've done Vue as well. So if you're wondering about how Vue works, then the Vue framework also is supported. And we're building more. If you have a JavaScript framework that you would like to see supported, then reach out to us and we'll make it happen. Right, so that was the demo inside our app registration. So we've done our app registration here. We have everything we need. And you'll notice that from an API permissions, we are calling into Graph to get our user information. Right, so let's close this one down. Let's jump to the remaining slides. I did promise not many slides, but maybe I lied a little bit. Okay, I love this slide. Come as you are. We love our developers, we love our IT pros, and we encourage everyone to bring their own tools, their own services, their own libraries. As long as they work with the standards, then we will support you, any platform. This is the controversial slide that I mentioned earlier. You'll see apart from Microsoft Identity at the very, very top, everything else is not Microsoft. But you'll be surprised that we have collaboration with a lot of these tool providers and solutions to allow you to be successful when it comes to managing your users and signing in, signing out. So IntelliJ, we're working on a project. JetBrains Rider already has support for Azure Active Directory inside the IDE. PyCharm the same. We're bringing all that goodness into your hands. And then we don't really care where you're running. In fact, we have customers today that have multi-cloud solutions. We can't force people to just use our stuff. So we want, again, for you to be successful. And for that to work, we want to be providing you with all the right tools to create secure solutions, whether they run on Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. We don't really care. And we don't care about which language you use. Well, we care deeply about what the experience looks like. but we don't force you down a .NET only path. We don't force you down a Microsoft stack only. We want to make that experience delightful, whether you're running in Python or whether you're doing everything in C++. Right. And finally, we don't really care about what the end solution looks like. If you're running Kubernetes on your on-prem environment, or if you're running serverless on some other service provider, we want the authentication to be easy and approachable to you without you being an expert and getting all that goodness out of the box. But if you are running on the Microsoft Identity stack and the Microsoft stack in general, then Identity provides you with some added benefits, like not having to have secrets anywhere end to end. I can develop locally on my machine, authenticate to Azure services without using any secrets, and then whether I'm using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or some command line tool, and then get access automatically to most of the Microsoft 365 platform data, OneDrive, Exchange, SharePoint, make it easy to access via Graph. Then the app service or the other service that you're going to use. Some of them are consuming those identities. Some of them are providing support. So a SQL Server does not really consume identity, but it works with identity to make sure that you can deploy and run your apps and call into SQL Server without using credentials. And finally, the Power Platform, which is becoming a lot more ubiquitous and important these days, can work with all these services interchangeably. So you can have Pro developers, you're working with Fusion developers, creating Power Apps that call APIs, all that secure end-to-end, because that's very important. Having security end-to-end is very, very important to me and hopefully to you as well. Single sign-on is very important. I was off for 2 weeks and I hadn't touched my phone. I came back and I didn't have to worry about signing into my Outlook and my Teams apps and what have you. All this is supported out of the box. And having mobile SSO, or I don't even know my password for my domain account. I use Hello all the time, so we have two-factor authentication using Windows Hello. And when I don't use Hello, my phone gets prompted for authentication. I tap it, it authenticates with my face, and it works out of the box. So eliminating or being in a passwordless solution, it's a fantastic experience for you and your users, because your users don't have to bug you every so often for their passwords. And it's a delightful experience using 20 different apps and not having to remember my password ever again. So as long as those devices are in tune and onboarded into your enterprise, they can provide single sign-on for your users. Let me skip this one. We already seen this one. We encourage you to use your favorite language. It is secure by default. Everything that we do, everything you build with Emsa automatically complies with security policies. An example at hand was the two-factor authentication I got prompted for my JavaScript app, because that was implemented by my IT team, that was me, on my demo account. And then finally, building richer experiences with pulling data from your existing resources without you having to go through the pain of setting up the authentication layers with tons and tons of code. B2C is very important. So B2C, because it is aimed to consumers, it's also very, very configurable. Now imagine somebody's using your mobile app and suddenly they get redirected to some random website to authenticate and then come back. It breaks the UI. So we want to make sure that when your users are using your apps, they have a delightful experience and they feel like they're staying in your app, even though they get redirected to a different experience to sign in. They still get that delightful experience. So B2C allows for full customization of what the user sign in, sign up, and log out experiences look like, which is very important for your customers. And because we also provide you with support for social media logins or any OpenID Connect client, it doesn't have to be some social media account. It can be a third-party OpenID Connect service that you want to use to authenticate your users with. That works as well. We support everything. And it can be built to not just for front-end solutions, but it can be an elaborate API to back-end services or front-end to APIs and what have you. Okay, I want to talk very, very briefly about .NET and Microsoft Identity. Obviously, they're both first-party, so we want to make that experience as awesome as possible. So if Marcia can do it, then Bob should be able to do it too. If I can do it, then you should be able to do it too. The Microsoft Identity Platform is a new library that was pushed out in September for .NET Core. So anything that you can build with .NET Core 3.1 or later supports that library. You can build Blazor, you can build gRPC services, you can build straight up web apps or Blazor solutions or WebAssembly. The whole point there is that we want to make it as frictionless as possible to implement authentication. If you are using older .NET or full .NET framework or older than .NET Core 3.1, or you're outside the .NET space, then we have the Emsa Library that allows you to authenticate against the Azure AD or B2C out of the box. And finally, you can bring your own libraries. Anything that is OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 compliant works absolutely fine with us. And we've shown it many times on our streams and on YouTube. So you can find that if you're very curious. And you know what? I have a demo here. Let's do the demo. I did promise you a demo with .NET. So let me bring my terminal to the side. So let's create a new directory. 2021, and we'll change directory to this directory. So we're here. Now we're going to create a brand new .NET web app with authentication, and I will guide you through the process of how that looks like. So .NET new, using the command line. You can do it in VS Code. You can also do it in Visual Studio, anything that supports .NET commands. So .NET or Project Writer. .NET new web app, and then here we'll say auth, and we'll say single org. So again, we're still using Azure AD, and we want to only users from our organization to be able to sign in. And with that, we're going to spin up a brand new web app, and I'm going to navigate into that. So there you go. We'll open code for this. Oh, that's not the one I want to maximize. That's our app over here. Let's close this one. It's a toggle screen demo. So what do we have here? We have our libraries. Let's restore the packages. We have two important libraries that we need to use: the Microsoft Identity.web and web.ui. These are the two libraries that contain everything you need to build authentication in your app. Now in startup, we have 2 lines of code: add authentication and add Microsoft Identity web app, because it is a web app. So you'll see these things here, and down here we have the add Microsoft Identity.ui, which drives the sign in, sign out experience. When you say I want to sign in, it takes you somewhere. That taking you somewhere is this line of code. And down here we have app use authentication. So with 6 lines of code, but I did promise you 1 line of code, right? So did I lie? Maybe I didn't. So let's see. Could I change this to be something more concise? Yes. Add Microsoft web app authentication and pass in the configuration here. Done. We are done. That's all you need to implement this. And with that, you will be able to run. Obviously, I need to configure the app settings here, which we don't have yet. But if I were to run this, it would actually go and authenticate the user out of the box. In fact, let's go and do it. Why not? Why not? Scottish Summit. So let's go and create a new one. So here we'll create a scottishsummit.net. We'll register this. And then we only have to do one more thing. We need to go into the authentication, and we need to say, we need to add a platform. In this instance, it is a web app, so we'll say web app. And here we need to enter the URI, so it will be HTTPS, localhost, because we're running locally for this one. It's 5001 for the port. And I messed up my T there. And then here we need to say sign in -OIDC. That's the endpoint where our tokens will be returned. I'm gonna check in this one and this one, configure, don't forget to save. It's already saved, which is good. And now we're good to rock and roll, but we need that information. So let's go and grab this, which is here. That's my application ID. Let's go back to our app settings. So that's my client ID or app ID. Whoop. Already pressed twice. We need the directory ID, which is this one. So let's go and put that back into our code. The tenant ID is actually the Azure Active Directory tenant that we're using. And here we need to say Microsoft.onmicrosoft.com. We can wipe out the rest. And that should be it. So if I say terminal, new terminal, and then now, because we're running a .NET solution, we'll do .NET run. And this should build and run our application. And if we open the browser, the first thing that we should see is us being prompted for authentication. So that's already started. So let's go to the browser. And lo and behold, we are presented with authentication. I need to choose the right tenant, which in this case, it's my Microsoft tenant. Now I'm prompted for my permissions. I need to consent to use the app. You can also report like, ooh, that looks like a suspicious thing. So accepting it, and we're in. You can see here, hello, my name, well, my email, but there you have it. One line of code. I didn't lie, right? So this is how easy we make it for you to implement solutions today. I want to quickly jump into Graph because you're probably using Microsoft Graph all the time and you don't really realize it because it's so awesome. The best example I can give you is every time you go into Outlook to type an email, like I do, you're usually presented with a list of people that you want to send it out. In the past, it was just trying to do some clever things, but it wasn't particularly clever, so you would try to guess it. Now with Graph, we do have an API that actually says, grab me the 10 most popular people that Christos is working with. And that's very important in an organization that has 200,000 people working with, right? So I don't want to be searching through the address book to find the people I need to send an email to. The first 4 or 5 names are usually the ones that send most of the emails, so it helps me being very, very productive. And that's the whole point. How can you be productive and how can you provide a rich experience to your users by using APIs out of the box? So the Graph is fantastic. You can build some incredible things, document management, portals, timelines, that are accessible to anything and anyone. It can be a console app, it can be some serverless solution, it can be a web app that exposes that information. It's all built on top of your existing data. So a trove of information available to you. And the easiest way to get started is through the Graph Explorer. So the Graph Explorer is a web portal that we have that allows you to, aka.ms, GE, allows you to quickly go and play around. You can be authenticated or unauthenticated. Oh, it already picked up my account, which is not good. I need to sign out because I don't want to show you important things. I mean, I don't want to show you my emails, right? I could, but we don't want that. So here you'll see you have the different queries that you can run. And then on this side, you can have all the different APIs that are available to you. And I'm quite zoomed in, that's why it's not a particularly good experience. So if I come down here, you have all the different options. So for example, if I were to run me, I'm not authenticated, so this even allows you to run it without an authentication in place. You can see my data down here. I am Megan Bowen for this example. I can also use the beta, which is our evergreen testing ground for getting more data to you. You'll see that this one contains a lot more information. But what I really like about this thing is the fact that we give you the code. If you find something that you like and you're like, you know what, I found exactly what I need to run, I know my query, then you get the code snippet for your language of choice, which is great. I love Graph Explorer. It can allow you to build some fantastic experiences. So make sure to have a look at that because it's built on top of the Microsoft Identity platform and it's available to you for free. Right, I think I have a couple more slides and we're done. So let's go back to our slides. The last slide is a reminder that we stream twice weekly, Tuesdays and Fridays, and it's at 4 p.m. UK time. So if you like what you saw, if you want to find more information about what we build, then we encourage you to join us and learn from us. And finally, I want to thank everyone for attending the session. I hope you're enjoying the rest of the Scottish Summit, and I saw that there are some fantastic sessions lined up for you. The video will be available in a few weeks after. I think it's 14 days after the event. So if you want to watch it offline, then it's also available to you. Thank you very much, and have a great day.